Amidst a billionaire's lavish wedding, only the maid's daughter heard the faint cries from the wall, and what she uncovered would shatter the perfect facade forever. The music was a wall of sound, the party a sea of power and wealth. But 9-year-old Emily, the maid's daughter, heard something no one else could. Not the celebration, but a desperate whisper from inside the cold mansion wall. "Help me." While the billionaire groom toasted his new bride, Emily knelt by a hidden, loose panel. She was paid to be invisible, but she had just found a child buried alive, and she would soon discover the monster who put him there was the woman in the white dress. And before we dive in, tell me where you're tuning from today in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. A 9-year-old girl was the only one who heard the wall crying. Emily pressed her ear against the cold, silk-covered wallpaper during the billionaire's wedding. Everyone else heard music and the clinking of champagne glasses, but she heard a whisper. The music was too loud. It bounced off the marble floors and high ceilings of the Caldwell estate. It felt like the sound was trying to smash the crystal chandeliers. Emily sat on a small stool tucked behind a heavy velvet curtain in the grand ballroom. She was small for 9 years old. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight braid, just how her mother liked it. Practical. From her hiding spot, she watched the party. It was a sea of expensive dresses and black tuxedos. Mr. Harrison Caldwell, the billionaire, was getting married. Again, this was his third wedding. Emily knew because she heard the other staff talking. Her mother, Susan, was one of the maids. Susan was flying around the ballroom right now, her face tight with stress, carrying a silver tray of tiny, complicated-looking appetizers. Emily was supposed to be in the staff kitchen, quiet, with a coloring book. But the kitchen was hot and smelled like boiled shrimp. She had slipped out an hour ago. No one noticed. People like them, her mother always said, were paid to be invisible. Emily was just naturally good at it. She watched the new wife. Her name was Margot. Margot was tall and beautiful, poured into a white dress that seemed to be made of diamonds. She laughed, a sound like tiny bells, but her eyes never smiled. Her eyes were sharp and quick. They scanned the room like a hawk looking for mice. When Margot's gaze passed over the serving staff, her smile tightened. It was a look Emily knew well. It was the look of someone who saw a scuff mark on a perfect floor. Emily felt a familiar pang of boredom, sharp and restless. She was 9. She did not care about champagne or boring adult talk. She slipped out from behind the curtain. The ballroom was huge, but the adjoining hallway offered escape. This hallway was different. It was dark, lined with old, dark paintings of ships on stormy seas and men in stiff collars who looked angry. The music from the party was muffled here, just the dull of the bass. Emily walked on the runner carpet, tracing the pattern with her sneaker. She leaned against the wall, enjoying the cool plaster through the thin silk wallpaper. She was thinking about her grandpa Joe. He was a war veteran. He had a medal, a bronze star, that he kept in a wooden box. He told her stories about being brave. "Bravery isn't about not being scared, Em," he'd say, his voice rough like sandpaper. "It's about being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. It's about seeing what's wrong and not looking away." Emily missed him. He lived far away, and her mother's job didn't pay enough for visits. She leaned her head back against the wall. Scrape. Emily froze. The sound was soft, right by her ear. It sounded like a fingernail dragging on wood. She held her breath. The house was old. It was probably just rats. Her mother said all big houses had rats, even billionaire houses. She pressed her ear flat against the wall. The wallpaper felt rough against her cheek. She heard it again. Not a scrape. It was a sound. A voice. Help. It was so faint, she thought she imagined it. It was a boy's voice. Small. Weak. Please, water. Emily's heart jumped into her throat. She looked up and down the hallway. It was empty. The sound was coming from inside the wall. Hello. Emily whispered at the wallpaper. A faint gasp came from the other side. Then, a desperate, frantic scratching. Emily looked closer. She saw the outline of one of the huge, ugly paintings. This one was a dark forest. It looked heavy, but next to it, low to the ground where the wooden wainscoting met the wall, she saw a dark line. It looked like a small panel, one meant to hide pipes or wires, painted over to match the wallpaper. It was loose. She knelt. Her hands were trembling. This was wrong. She should get her mother. But her mother was working. Her mother would be angry she left the kitchen. Help me. Emily thought of Grandpa Joe. not looking away. She put her small fingers into the crack of the panel and pulled. It resisted, stuck with old paint, but then it gave way with a soft pop. It wasn't a panel. It was just a hole, roughly made, hidden by a piece of loose drywall and the wallpaper over it. Behind it was darkness. A cold, damp air puffed out, smelling of dust and something sour. "Hello?" she whispered into the blackness. Her fingers reached into the hole. She touched cobwebs. Then, rough brick. Her hand went deeper, into a space between the studs. Her fingers brushed something. It was warm. It was skin. Emily nearly screamed. It was an arm. A thin, small arm, covered in cold, damp sweat. From the darkness, there was a sigh. Not of relief. It was a sigh of absolute panic, as if her hand was a spider. The arm tried to pull away, but it was too weak. "Who are you?" Emily breathed. "T. Thomas," the voice stuttered. "She locked me in. Please. I'm thirsty." Thomas. Emily knew that name. That was Mr. Caldwell's son. The boy from the first marriage. The boy who was supposed to be at a special camp in Switzerland. Her mother had been cleaning his room just last week, packing his things away. Before Emily could answer, she heard a sound that chilled her blood. Footsteps. Sharp, clicking heels on the marble floor at the end of the hall. Emily yanked her hand back. She scraped her knuckles hard on the rough edge of the plaster. A sharp pain shot up her arm. She tried to push the loose panel back into place, but it wouldn't sit right. She fumbled with it, her fingers slick with cold sweat from the boy's arm. "What are you doing?" The voice was sweet, but cold as ice. Emily sprang up and spun around. Margot, the bride, stood 10 feet away. Her diamond dress glittered. Her blue eyes were not smiling. They were cold and sharp, like blue glass chips. Margot walked slowly toward Emily. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like the paintings on the wall, beautiful and angry. "I asked you a question, child." I was lost," Emily stammered. "I was looking for the bathroom." Margot stopped, just a foot away. Emily had to crane her neck to look up at her. The woman smelled strongly of jasmine and something bitter underneath. "The bathrooms," Margot said softly, "are in the other direction. This is a private wing. You are the maid's daughter, aren't you? Susan's girl." "Yes, ma'am." Emily's voice was a squeak. Margot's eyes scanned Emily from head to toe. Her gaze stopped on Emily's right hand. Emily looked down. Her knuckles were bleeding, and her fingertips were covered in white plaster dust and gray dust from the hole. Emily quickly clenched her hand into a fist and hid it behind her back. But Margot had seen. The bride's smile was terrifying. It showed all her teeth, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know, Emily," she said, her voice a silky whisper, "I detest snooping. My mother always told me that curious children often get lost. Sometimes, they get lost for good." Emily's heart was beating so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She thought of the boy in the wall. Thomas. She remembered her Grandpa Joe's face. "Be brave, Em." Emily lifted her chin, just a little. She didn't cry. "I wasn't snooping. I was just lost." Margot studied her for a long, terrible moment. She was looking at Emily as if deciding where to step on an insect. "See that you find your way back to the kitchen," Margot said, her voice suddenly sharp, like a command. "If I see you out here again, I will make sure your mother doesn't just lose her job. I will make sure she never works in this city again. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." Margot turned, her dress rustling like dry leaves. She walked back down the hall toward the thumping music of the party. She didn't look back. Emily waited until the sound of the heels faded. When she was finally alone, her legs gave out. She slid down the wall, landing hard on the floor. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She knew Margot wasn't just threatening her. Margot knew. She knew Emily had found the hole. She knew Emily had touched Thomas. Emily stared at the badly hidden panel. She knew, with the cold certainty of a child, that Margot was the one who had put him in there. She pulled her knees to her chest, her mind racing. Why? Why would a bride lock a little boy in a wall? And then she remembered. It was from 2 weeks ago. Her mother, Susan, thought Emily was asleep on the cot in the staff break room. Susan was talking to Martha, the head cook. "She hates him," Susan had whispered, her voice tired. "The new one, Margot. She hates little Thomas." "It's always the way," Martha had muttered back, stirring sugar into her coffee. "A new wife doesn't want the old wife's child reminding the husband of his past." "But Harrison adores that boy," Susan said. "Or he used to. Before she came." "Before she came," Martha repeated. Now he only sees what she tells him to see. She told him the boy was troubled, that he was acting out, that he needed specialized schooling abroad. Packing a 7-year-old off to Switzerland, Susan sighed. It's a heartache. The boy was crying all last week. He told me he didn't want to go. He said Margot scared him. He said she told him if he didn't stop crying, she'd give him something to really cry about. Hush now, Martha said, noticing Emily stir. Emily had pretended to be asleep, but she hadn't forgotten. Now, sitting on the cold floor in the dark hallway, it all made sense. Thomas hadn't been sent to Switzerland. He was right here. Margot hadn't just packed him away. She had hidden him, buried him alive. The wedding music surged from the ballroom, a wave of laughter and celebration. Mr. Caldwell was in there, toasting his new wife, while his son was suffocating just a few dozen feet away. Emily looked at her bleeding knuckles, covered in plaster dust. She was the only one who knew, a 9-year-old girl, and a bride who had just threatened to destroy her mother. Emily got to her feet. Her legs still felt like jelly, but the shaking was different now. It wasn't just fear. It was anger. A cold, hard anger she inherited straight from Grandpa Joe. She put her ear back to the wall. Thomas, she whispered, her voice low and fierce. Thomas, can you hear me? Don't be scared. My name is Emily. I'm going to get you out. There was no answer, just a terrifying, heavy silence. Emily's breath came in short, sharp bursts. Silence. The wall was silent. Had he passed out? Had Margot heard him? Emily pressed her ears so hard against the wallpaper it hurt. The dull thump-thump of the music from the party was like a giant, uncaring heartbeat. She heard it again. A movement. A horribly weak sound, like cloth sliding on brick. He was still alive. He needed water. His voice was like dry leaves. Emily stood up. She had to go to the kitchen. She had to walk back toward the noise, the people, and the one person she was most afraid of. She forced her jelly legs to move. She walked out of the dark hallway, back toward the blazing light and sound of the ballroom. She kept her head down, her bloody knuckles hidden in her pocket. She tried to make herself small, invisible. She skirted the edge of the ballroom, hiding behind a row of tall, potted palms. She could see the kitchen entrance. It was a whirlwind of activity. Waiters shouted orders. White-jacketed chefs yelled back. Her mother, Susan, rushed out, her face pale and dotted with sweat. Susan saw her. Her mother's face, already stressed, crumpled into a new shape. It was fear and anger, all mixed together. She grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her into a small alcove where the cleaning supplies were kept. Emily, what did I tell you? Where have you been? Her mother's voice was a harsh whisper. I have been sick with worry. I told you to stay put. I'm sorry, Mama. Emily's mind raced. She couldn't tell the truth. Margot's threat was too real. My stomach hurts. I think I'm going to be sick. It was a good lie. It was believable. Her mother's anger melted, just a little, replaced by tired sympathy. Oh, sweetheart. Susan sighed. She wiped a stray piece of hair from Emily's forehead. You look white as a sheet. It's probably the shrimp smell. I can't stand it either. She reached into the pocket of her black apron and pulled out a half-full bottle of water. Here, take this. Go to the staff pantry. It's quiet in there. Sit down, drink this, and do not move. I mean it, Emily. If Mr. Henderson finds you wandering, I'll lose this job. Do you understand? Yes, Mama. Go. Now. I'll check on you when this dinner rush is over. Susan gave her a quick, worried kiss on the head and then hurried back into the fray. Emily clutched the water bottle. It felt like a heavy gold bar. She felt a sharp, twisting guilt for lying to her mother. But the image of the boy's thin, sweaty arm made her feet move. She didn't go to the pantry. She waited until her mother was gone, then slipped back behind the potted palms. She scanned the room. Margot was at the head table, laughing, holding a champagne glass. Mr. Caldwell was watching his new wife, his eyes full of a blurry, silly love. He looked like a man in a dream. Emily ran. She ran back to the dark hallway. Her sneakers made no sound on the thick rug. She reached the loose panel. She pulled it open. The smell of dust and fear hit her again. Thomas, she whispered, her voice shaking. It's me, Emily. I have water. A scratch. Please. I'm so thirsty. Emily looked at the bottle, then at the jagged hole. The bottle would never fit. The hole was barely big enough for her small arm. It won't fit, she said, panic rising in her throat. I can't get it to you. No. Please, don't go. His voice cracked with despair. Emily's mind was spinning. Think. Think like Grandpa Joe. He always had a solution. He could fix a tractor with a piece of wire and some tape. A straw. She needed a straw. She remembered seeing a large glass jar of them on the bar, right at the entrance to the ballroom. She had to go back into the party. She tucked the water bottle under her thin shirt. The cold plastic shocked her skin. She crept back to the edge of the ballroom. It was louder now. A band was playing a slow, swaying song. She could see the bar. It was crowded. Men in tuxedos were laughing, waiting for drinks. Emily dropped to her hands and knees. She crawled under the long, white tablecloth of an empty guest table. It was dark, a forest of chair legs and discarded napkins. She moved from one table to the next, a small ghost in the shadows. She peeked out. She was close to the bar. She could see the feet of the people waiting. A waiter rushed by, his arms full of dirty glasses. He bumped into the bar, and a small, clear plastic container of new straws fell from the counter. They scattered across the polished floor. Damn it, the waiter hissed, but he was too busy to pick them up. He hurried away. Emily scrambled forward, quick as a mouse. She grabbed 1, 2, 3 straws. She shoved them into her pocket and crawled back the way she came, table by table, until she was safe in the shadows of the potted palms. She ran back to the hallway, her heart hammering against the cold water bottle. Thomas, I'm back. She tore the panel away. I have straws. I'm going to push one through. Can you get it? I'll try. She fed one of the straws into the darkness. It was like threading a needle in the dark. She pushed it gently, until she felt it hit the back of the brick. I can't reach it, he whimpered. Wait. Emily pulled it back. She connected 2 of the straws, fitting one inside the other to make a longer one. She pushed it back in, slowly, gently, wiggling it. I have it. His voice was a sudden, sharp gasp. I have it. Okay, hold on. Emily's hands were shaking so badly, she could barely unscrew the cap on the water bottle. She put the end of the straw into the bottle's opening. Okay, she whispered. Drink. She tilted the bottle. The water ran down the straw. From inside the wall came the sound of desperate, ragged gulping. It was the most terrible and most beautiful sound Emily had ever heard. She gave him as much as she could, until the bottle was nearly empty. A moment of silence passed. Thank you, he finally whispered. His voice was stronger. Not much, but it was there. Thomas, who did this? Emily asked, though she already knew. Her. Margot. His voice was flat with a pure, childish hatred. She put me in here. She said I was a bad boy. She said I ruined everything. Why? Emily whispered. Why would she do this? I saw her, Thomas said. His voice was getting fainter again, tired. In the garden. By the pool house. It was Jim, the pool man. She was kissing him. Emily's eyes went wide. I heard her. Thomas continued, his words slow. She said after she married my dad, they would be rich. They'd have all the money. And they would make me go away for good. To that camp in Switzerland. Forever. What did you do? I was mad. I told her I would tell my dad. I told her he would stop the wedding. I ran. But she caught me. She's so strong. She said I was a liar. She said I was sick. She dragged me to my room. Emily pictured the bride, so beautiful in her white dress, dragging the small boy. She took me to my closet. Thomas breathed. There's a panel in the back. For old pipes. She pushed me in. It's not a room, Emily. It's just the wall. It's black. I can't stand up. I can't even sit. I'm just on my side. In the dark. Emily felt the sick feeling from her lie to her mother become real. He was entombed. She pushed me in, he cried softly. And I heard it. A hammer. Bang. 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 She nailed it shut, Emily. From the other side. From my room. Emily's blood ran cold. This hole, he said, his voice fading. I made this hole. With an old nail I found in here. I've been scratching. For so long. I didn't know if it was day or night. And then, I heard you. The wedding music surged again. A cheer went up from the ballroom. They were probably cutting the cake. Emily knew, with a sudden, terrible clarity, that this was not just about hiding him. Margot was not going to let him out. She had planned to leave him here. To let him die. The wedding. The party. The honeymoon. By the time they got back, it would be too late. Everyone would think he was safe and difficult in Switzerland. Thomas, hold on, Emily said, her voice fierce. I have to get into your room. I have to get you out from the other side. It's locked, he whispered. She locked the door. I heard her. And she has the key. Emily's mind was a blank wall of panic. She was just a 9-year-old girl. She couldn't break down a locked door. She couldn't fight a grown-up. She thought of her mother. She thought of Margot's threat. Then she thought of Grandpa Joe. It's about being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. She had to tell someone. But who? Her mother was out. The staff wouldn't believe her. The police would laugh at her. There was only one person. The only person who had the power to stop this. The only person who might believe her. Mr. Caldwell. His father. The groom. The man who was right now, at this very second, toasting the woman who was murdering his son. Emily had to get to him. She had to walk into the middle of that glittering, massive party, past the ice sculptures and the champagne, and tell a billionaire that his new wife was a monster. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in the hallway felt thick and dead. The air in the ballroom was alive, but it felt dangerous, like a bright, loud ocean she had to cross. She stood at the edge of the dark hallway, looking into the blazing light. It was like standing at the mouth of a cave, looking out at a burning forest. She thought about her mother. Susan's face, pale with exhaustion. If I see you out here again, I will make sure your mother doesn't just lose her job. Margot's voice was a cold snake in her memory. What if Mr. Caldwell didn't believe her? He would call security. They would drag her out. Her mother would be fired. They would be put on the street. All because of a story about a boy in a wall. And what would happen to Thomas? Emily closed her eyes. She saw his thin, sweaty arm in the darkness. She heard his ragged, desperate gulping. She nailed it shut. Emily. If she did nothing, Thomas would die. He would die in the dark, alone, while his father drank champagne. It was a simple, horrible math. Her mother's job, or Thomas's life. It's about being scared to death and doing the right thing anyway. Grandpa Joe's voice was so clear, it was as if he were standing right next to her. Emily opened her eyes. The fear was still there. It was a cold, heavy rock in her stomach. But the anger was there, too. It was hot, and it was bigger than the fear. She stepped out of the hallway. The noise hit her like a physical blow. The band was playing a fast, cheerful song. Hundreds of people were talking, laughing, and shouting over the music. The clinking of glasses and silverware was a constant, high-pitched ring. Emily's senses were on fire. The air was heavy with the smell of perfume, roasted meat, and wine. Light glittered everywhere, from the chandeliers, from the sequin dresses, from the diamonds on the women's necks. It was beautiful, and it was ugly. It was a party celebrating a woman who had buried a child. She scanned the room. The head table. It was on a raised platform at the far end of the ballroom. It was like a king's court. There he was, Mr. Harrison Caldwell. He was laughing, his arm draped over the back of Margot's chair. Emily started to move. She stayed close to the walls, just as her mother had taught her. Be invisible. She was a small gray mouse in a jungle of glittering predators. No one looked down. No one saw her. She passed a group of waiters holding silver trays. One of them, a tall man named Robert, spotted her. Hey, kid, you're not supposed to be in here, he hissed, grabbing her shoulder. Where's your mom? I have to. Emily stammered, trying to pull away. You're going to get Susan in a world of trouble. Come on, back to the kitchen. He started to steer her toward the service door. No, Emily shouted. It wasn't a loud shout, but it was desperate. She twisted, hard, and slipped out of his grasp. Hey, he called after her, but he couldn't leave his post. Emily ran. She was in the open now, on the main floor. A woman in a giant, feathered red dress stepped backward, not seeing her. The woman's sharp heel landed on Emily's sneaker. Oomph! Emily fell to her knees. Oh, my word! The woman exclaimed, looking down as if she'd stepped on a piece of trash. Whose child is this? How dreadful! She didn't offer a hand. She just turned back to her conversation. Emily scrambled up. Her knee was stinging. She kept going. She was halfway across the room. She could see the head table clearly now. She saw Mr. Henderson, the estate manager. He was a tall, thin man with a face like a dried apple. He was the one who paid her mother. He was the one who could fire her with a snap of his fingers. Mr. Henderson saw her. His eyes narrowed. He started to move toward her, a shark cutting through the water. Emily panicked. She didn't have time. She dodged left, slipping between two men who were arguing about golf. She ran straight toward the raised platform. She was almost there. 10 more feet. A hand shot out and grabbed her arm. It wasn't a waiter. It wasn't Mr. Henderson. The grip was iron strong. The fingers dug into her skin, just above the elbow. Emily looked up. It was Margot. The bride had seen her. She had gotten up from the table so fast, so silently, that no one had even noticed. She stood in front of Emily, blocking her path to Mr. Caldwell. Her smile was still in place. The partygoers just saw a beautiful bride bending down to greet a small child. But Emily saw her eyes. They were not eyes. They were blue flames. "You," Margot whispered. Her voice was a low, vibrating growl. It was a sound of pure, bottomless hatred. "You stupid, stupid little girl." Her fingers tightened. Emily winced. The pain was sharp. "I warned you," Margot breathed, her face just inches from Emily's. The smell of jasmine and wine was suffocating. "I told you what would happen. Now you've done it. You just cost your mother everything. Let me go." Emily struggled, but the grip was like steel. "You're going to turn around," Margot commanded, her voice deathly quiet. "You're going to walk back to the kitchen. You're going to get your mother, and you are both going to get off this property. If you say one word, one sound, I will personally call the police and tell them you were trying to steal. Do you understand me?" Emily looked past the glittering white dress. She could see Mr. Caldwell. He was watching them, a small, confused smile on his face. He thought his new wife was being sweet to a staff member's child. He raised his glass in a small toast. Margot saw him look. Her smile widened. She used her other hand to pat Emily's head, a horrible, mocking gesture. "Such a sweet girl," she said, just loud enough for her new husband to see the kindness. Then her eyes snapped back to Emily. "Get out. Now." This was it. This was the moment. Emily could turn around, save her mother's job, and let Thomas die. Or she could do the right thing. Emily thought of her bleeding knuckles. She thought of the desperate scratching. She thought of the dry, weak voice. "Please, water." She looked at the beautiful, terrible woman holding her. This woman, who kissed her new husband while she left his son to rot in a wall. The anger. It finally boiled over. It was hotter than her fear. It was hotter than her pain. "He's in the wall," Emily said. Her voice was quiet, but it was clear. Margot's smile flickered. "What did you say?" "He's in the wall," Emily said again, louder this time. She stopped pulling against Margot's grip. She just stood and looked her right in the eye. "Thomas. I heard him. I gave him water. You locked him in." For a split second, the mask fell. Emily saw the real Margot. It was pure, distilled panic. The blue eyes went wide with shock and fury. The grip on her arm loosened, just for a moment. It was all Emily needed. She planted her good foot and screamed. It was not a child's scream. It was a raw, piercing sound of pure terror and rage that cut through the music, the laughter, and the clinking glasses. "No. Let me go? You're hurting me." She ripped her arm free from Margot's shocked grasp. The entire ballroom went silent. The band stopped, a violin squeaking to a halt. 200 guests, Mr. Henderson, and all the staff turned. They stared. Emily stood in the sudden, vast silence. She was panting, her arm throbbing. She pointed a trembling finger, not at Margot, but at the man still sitting at the head table, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. "Mr. Caldwell," she shouted, her voice cracking. She locked him in. She locked Thomas in the wall. A vast, heavy silence pressed down on the ballroom. 200 mouths were open. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on the small, 9-year-old girl in the simple dress, standing alone on the polished floor. Emily was shaking, but she didn't lower her arm. She kept pointing at Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Harrison Caldwell slowly, very slowly, put his wine glass down. His face was a mask of confusion. What did you say, child?" he asked. His voice was not angry, just bewildered. Beside him, Margot burst into a high, tinkling laugh. It was a terrible, brittle sound. "Harrison, darling, I am so sorry," she said, stepping back toward the table. She put a hand on his arm. This is just dreadful. This is Susan's girl, the maid's daughter. She's been a problem all night. She's clearly overtired and confused." She turned her sharp, beautiful face to the guests. "Please, everyone, I do apologize for this interruption. Mr. Henderson, would you please handle this?" Mr. Henderson, his face pale and furious, strode toward Emily. You Come with me. Now. No. Emily cried. She sidestepped him, her eyes still locked on Mr. Caldwell. She's lying. Thomas is in the wall. He's in the dark hallway. He's alive. This is insane, Margot said. Her voice was louder now, sharp with indignation. Harrison, this child is lying. Thomas is in Switzerland. We have the receipts from the school. He's been difficult. You know that. He probably paid this girl to say this. To ruin our day. I am not lying. Emily shouted, her voice raw. She felt a new, horrible wave of panic. They weren't believing her. They were all looking at her like she was crazy. Emily. Oh, dear God, Emily. A new voice cut through the tension. It was her mother. Susan ran into the ballroom from the service door, her face white with terror. She had a dish towel in her hand. She ran to Emily and grabbed her, pulling her close. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, I am so sorry. I don't know what's gotten into her. She's not well. Susan stammered, tears of pure fear and shame welling in her eyes. We're leaving. We will go right now. I'm so sorry. Susan tried to drag Emily away, pulling her toward the kitchen. You have ruined us, Emily, she whispered, her voice breaking. What have you done? No, Mama. You don't understand. Emily fought against her mother's grip. He's going to die? She'll kill him. That is enough. Margot shrieked. The elegant mask was gone. Her face was a twisted knot of rage. Security. Get this lunatic child and her incompetent mother out of my house. Wait. It was one word, but it stopped everyone. Mr. Caldwell stood up. He was a tall man, and the power in the room instantly shifted to him. He was not smiling. He was not confused anymore. He looked, for the first time, like the billionaire who ran a global empire. He looked at his new wife. He looked at the terrified maid. And then he looked at Emily. Child, he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. My son is on another continent. What you are saying is a very, very serious accusation. Why should I believe you? Emily's heart was a drum. This was her one chance. She stopped fighting her mother. She stepped forward. Because of this, she said. She held out her right hand. In the bright light of the ballroom, everyone could see. Her knuckles were raw and bloody. White plaster dust and gray grime were caked under her fingernails and in the lines of her palm. I got this, Emily said, her voice clear and strong, from pulling the panel off the wall. The panel she hid him behind. Mr. Caldwell stared at her hand. And this, Emily said. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers fumbled. She pulled out the 2 plastic straws, still wet, and the nearly empty water bottle she had shoved under her shirt. I gave him water. He was so thirsty. He said he's been in there for days. He used a nail to scratch the hole I found. A low murmur went through the crowd. This was not a vague accusation. This was physical evidence. Margot's face was ashen. This is a trick. She's a performer. Harrison, don't be a fool. It's a shakedown. They want money, she said. Emily took another breath, remembering. She said you wouldn't believe me. She said I'd be in trouble. She said she would make my mom lose her job if I told anyone. She threatened you? Mr. Caldwell's voice was dangerously low. Yes, in the hallway, just before. She grabbed my arm. Emily pointed to the spot on her arm where Margot's fingers had dug in. A faint red mark was already forming. Mr. Caldwell looked at his wife. Her eyes were wide with a frantic, hunted look. And I know why she did it. Emily pushed on, the words tumbling out. Thomas told me. He said he saw her. In the garden. By the pool house. He saw her kissing Jim, the pool man. The gasp from the crowd was loud this time. Jim, the young, handsome pool man, was a well-known figure on the estate. He said. Emily continued, her voice unwavering, that he heard them. He heard her say that after she married you, they would be rich, and they would send him away forever. He told her he would tell you. And that's when she grabbed him. Lies. All of it. Vicious, filthy lies. Margot screamed. She lunged, not at Emily, but at her husband. Harrison, my love, you can't believe this. This is poison. This is that boy's last, hateful attempt to ruin us. He's in Switzerland, I tell you. Call the school. All right, Mr. Caldwell said. He looked at his wife, his eyes cold and unreadable. We will. He turned to Mr. Henderson. Henderson, get my phone. Call the school in Switzerland. Now, put it on speaker. Sir, Mr. Henderson stammered. It's the middle of the night in Gstaad. I don't care if it's the surface of the sun. Call them. Get the headmaster on the line. I pay him enough to answer." Mr. Henderson fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. "And in the meantime," Mr. Caldwell said, turning his gaze to the dark hallway where Emily was pointing, "we are all going to take a walk." He looked back at his new wife. Her face was a perfect, beautiful mask of pure terror. "You'll come with me, my dear," he said. There was no warmth in his voice. "And you," he said to Emily. "You will show me." He started to walk. The party was over. Mr. Caldwell marched across the floor. Emily, still held by her shaking mother, walked beside him. Margot, her face like stone, was forced to follow. Behind them, a silent, stunned crowd of guests trailed like a grim parade. They reached the dark, private hallway. The paintings of angry men and stormy seas stared down at them. "Here," Emily said, her voice small again. She pointed to the wall, just beside the painting of the dark forest. "It's here, behind the panel." Mr. Caldwell looked at the wall. From a distance, it looked perfect. But up close, with 100 eyes watching, they could all see it. The faint outline. The way the wallpaper didn't quite sit flat. "Harrison, this is madness," Margot whispered. "You are tearing our wedding apart because of a maid." Mr. Caldwell ignored her. He stepped forward and put his hand on the panel Emily had pointed to. He pushed. The loose drywall, which Emily had failed to secure, popped inward. It fell into the darkness with a soft thud. A puff of cold, sour air and plaster dust came out of the hole. From the crowd, someone gasped. Mr. Caldwell knelt. He was a billionaire in a $1,000 tuxedo, on his knees in a dusty hallway. He peered into the black, narrow space. "Thomas," he called. His voice was rough. "Son, are you in there?" A long, terrible second of silence passed. Then, from the darkness, came a voice. It was not a child's voice. It was the dry, broken croak of an animal. "Dad." Mr. Caldwell choked. A sound, half sob, half roar, tore from his throat. "He's in there. Oh my God, he's in there," he bellowed. He plunged his arm into the hole, just as Emily had. "I feel him. He's alive. Get him out. Get him out now." All eyes snapped to Margot. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just stood there, her white dress looking like a shroud. Her face was blank. She had lost. "Thomas said." Emily spoke, her voice clear in the horrified silence, that she nailed it shut. From the other side. From his room. Mr. Caldwell stood up. His face was a terrifying sight. It was purple with rage, his eyes streaming with tears. "Henderson," he roared. "Get a crowbar. Get an axe. Get anything. Break down his bedroom door. Now." Now, Mr. Henderson didn't need to be told twice. He was a loyal employee, but he was also a father. His face was a mask of grim duty. "Robert. Frank. With me. Get a fire axe from the hall closet." He shouted to two of the burly security guards who were posing as valets. The entire wedding party surged forward. The decorum was gone. The glitter and glamour evaporated, replaced by a raw, mob-like energy. They moved out of the ballroom, a wave of tuxedos and silk dresses, following Mr. Caldwell, who was half running, half stumbling toward the grand staircase. Emily and her mother were swept up in the crowd. Susan held Emily's hand in a death grip. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just gone. Her eyes were wide and blank with shock. She was a passenger, dragged along by the horrible tide. They thundered up the curved marble staircase, the sound of 200 expensive shoes echoing like an avalanche. Only one person did not move. Margot. She remained at the entrance to the dark hallway, a statue in white. Her billion-dollar wedding dress pooled around her feet. The guests, in their haste to see the horror, parted around her, giving her a wide berth as if she were diseased. She stared at the empty space where her husband had been. Her mask of indignation was gone. Her mask of beauty was gone. There was nothing left but a cold, hollow emptiness. She had bet everything, and in 1 second, a 9-year-old girl with plaster on her hands had taken it all. Mr. Caldwell saw her stop. He paused at the top of the stairs and looked down at her. "Frank," he called back, his voice echoing in the massive foyer. "Stay with my wife. Do not let her out of your sight. Wait for the police." Frank, the security guard, nodded grimly. He took a position 10 feet from Margot, his arms crossed. The bride was now a prisoner in her own wedding. Mr. Caldwell turned and ran down the upstairs hall. They reached Thomas's bedroom. The door was solid oak, with a shiny brass knob. It was locked, just as Thomas had said. "Stand back," Mr. Henderson yelled. He and Robert lifted the heavy, red and silver fire axe. The axe bit into the wood, inches from the lock. A woman in the crowd screamed. Wood splintered. The sound was violent, tearing through the quiet luxury of the house. Crash. The lock mechanism shattered. Mr. Henderson kicked the door. It flew open and slammed against the inside wall. Mr. Caldwell pushed past him. He didn't even see the room. He ran straight for the closet. It was a walk-in closet, large, filled with small, expensive-looking suits and rows of tiny shoes. Mr. Caldwell tore through the clothes, throwing them from the racks. Thomas! Thomas! And there it was. At the back of the closet, where there should have been a solid wall, was a piece of pale, unpainted drywall. It was held in place by 6 long, silver-backed screws, drilled directly into the studs. It was a crude, hasty job. A job done by someone strong and in a hurry. A drill. Mr. Caldwell roared. "There's a drill in my study. Go." "No time, sir," Robert, the guard, said. He still had the axe. "Cover your face." He swung the axe sideways. The blunt end, the hammer side, smashed into the center of the drywall. It punched a hole. A terrible, musty smell puffed out. The smell of a crypt. Mr. Caldwell clawed at the hole, ripping the plasterboard away with his bare hands. His tuxedo tore. His fingers bled. He didn't notice. The guests and staff piled up at the doorway, a silent, horrified audience. Emily and her mother stood at the back, Emily just tall enough to see between the elbows of the adults. Mr. Caldwell tore the last piece of drywall away. He froze. For a moment, all he did was stare into the blackness. The space between the studs was barely 2 feet wide. It was dark, filled with cobwebs, old insulation, and thick dust. At the bottom, curled in a tight ball, was Thomas. He was in his pajamas, the ones with little blue rockets on them. They were filthy, stiff with dried sweat and plaster. He was so pale. His skin was gray. His lips were blue and cracked open. He was covered in a fine white dust that made him look like a small, stone statue. His eyes were open, but they were dull. He was staring at the light, but not seeing it. A sound came from the crowd. It was a collective, weeping gasp. Several women turned away, sobbing into their hands. Mr. Caldwell made a low, animal sound. It was the sound of a heart breaking. He fell to his knees. "Thomas," he whispered. "Oh God. Son, what did she do to you?" He reached into the wall, his big, strong hands trembling violently. He gently, so gently, touched the boy's shoulder. At his touch, the boy's eyes flickered. They found his father's face. "I knew you'd come," Thomas whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. She said you were on her side. I told her you'd come." "I'm here," Mr. Caldwell choked, tears streaming down his face, cutting clean paths through the plaster dust that had settled on his cheeks. "I'm here, son. I've got you. I've got you." He slid his arms under the boy's limp body. He was terrifyingly light. Mr. Caldwell lifted his son out of the wall, out of the grave his new wife had built for him. He pulled Thomas to his chest, holding him, rocking him, his face buried in the boy's dusty, matted hair. "I'm so sorry, Thomas," he wept, his voice muffled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see. Emily watched. She felt a cold, deep sadness settle over her. This was the moment of rescue. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt broken. Everything was broken. Her mother, Susan, finally let out the breath she had been holding. It came out as a sob. She pulled Emily into her side, her arm a steel band around her. "Oh, Emily," she whispered, her voice shaking with a new, profound understanding. "Oh, my brave, brave girl. What did you do? You saved him." The fear for her job was gone. All that was left was a mother's awe and a mother's terror. "Someone call a doctor," Mr. Caldwell roared, standing up, his son cradled in his arms. "Call an ambulance. Now." He turned and pushed his way through the stunned crowd. He didn't look at anyone. He just had one focus, his son. He walked out of the bedroom, down the hall, and back to the main staircase. He moved with a terrible, focused purpose. He walked right up to Margot. She was still standing there, watched by the guard. She looked up as he approached, her face pale and defiant. Mr. Caldwell stopped, one step above her. He held his son out. Thomas was barely conscious, his head lolling against his father's shoulder. "Look at him," Mr. Caldwell commanded. His voice was not loud. It was dead. It was cold as the space between the walls. Look at him. Margot's eyes darted to the boy's gray face. She flinched, a small, involuntary twitch. She tried to look away. I said, look at him, Mr. Caldwell shouted, the force of it making her shrink back. She forced her eyes onto the child. This is what you did, he said, his voice shaking with a rage so deep it was almost silent. This is what you did. On our wedding day. Margot said nothing. Her lips were a thin, bloodless line. The wedding is over, Mr. Caldwell said. Everything is over. He looked at the security guard. Frank, call the city police. Tell them to send every car they have. Tell them it's attempted murder. He turned his back on her. He didn't give her another glance. He held his son tight and walked down the stairs, pushing past the horrified guests, shouting for water, for blankets, for his doctor. He passed Emily and Susan, who were huddled by the hallway entrance. He stopped for 1 second. His eyes, ravaged by tears and fury, met Emily's. He looked at the small, 9-year-old girl. He looked at her blonde braid. He looked at her bleeding, dusty hand, still clutched by her mother. He didn't say thank you. The words were too small for what she had done. He just looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw the whole, terrible story. The guilt, the gratitude, the pain. He gave a single, sharp nod. It was a soldier's nod, a nod of shared understanding, a nod that said, I see you. Then he was gone, rushing his son toward the front door, just as the first wail of a siren grew in the distance. Emily, her mother, and the 200 guests were left standing in the ruins of the party, the sound of an axe echoing in the silence. The sirens grew from a distant wail to a piercing shriek. Red and blue lights flashed through the tall, arched windows of the ballroom, painting the marble walls in colors of panic. The wedding guests did not leave. They were frozen. They were watching a play they had never bought tickets for. Emily and her mother stood near the grand staircase. Susan's arm was still wrapped around Emily, as if she were protecting her from a tidal wave that had already passed. Susan was staring at the space where Mr. Caldwell had stood, her mind trying to catch up with the last 10 minutes. 2 police officers were the first through the door. They were big men, their blue uniforms and heavy belts looking rough and real against the silks and velvets of the party. Who called it in? One officer asked, his hand on his radio. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his face gray. I did. On behalf of Mr. Caldwell. The suspect is over there. He pointed. The officers walked toward Margot. She was still standing at the foot of the stairs. She was no longer a beautiful bride. She was just a woman in a very expensive dress. She looked small. Ma'am, the first officer said, we need to ask you some questions. Margot looked at him. She said nothing. Her face was as blank and white as her dress. Ma'am, we are investigating an attempted kidnapping and an attempted murder, the officer said, his voice hesitant, as if he couldn't believe the words he was saying in this house. It was the pool man, Margot said. Her voice was flat, a monotone. It was all Jim. He hated the boy. He did it. I didn't know. It was one last, desperate lie. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice hardening. He had heard lies before. We already have a patrol car picking up Mr. Jim Davis at the back gate. He was trying to leave. And he is very cooperative. He is telling us a very different story. Margot's last bit of hope died. Her shoulders slumped. Margot Caldwell, the officer said, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of a minor, kidnapping, and conspiracy. He turned her around, his movements practiced and impersonal. He did not care about her dress. The sound in the massive, silent foyer was sharp. It was the click of the handcuffs as they locked around her wrists, behind her back. The bride in her diamond dress was arrested. As the officers led her toward the door, she had to pass Emily and Susan. Margot stopped. She looked at Emily. Her eyes, which had been blank, were now filled with a dark, cold fire. It was a look of pure, bottomless hate. It was a look that said, I was a queen, and you were just a mouse. And you did this to me. Emily didn't shrink back. She didn't cry. She just held her mother's hand and looked back. She met the woman's gaze until the officer gently pulled Margot away, out into the flashing lights. The party was over. The guests began to leave, a quiet, stunned herd. They filed out, their faces pale. They would have a story to tell for the rest of their lives. Finally, the house was quiet. It was just Emily and Susan and Mr. Henderson and a few of the staff, who were now just walking aimlessly, picking up glasses, not knowing what else to do. The kitchen was silent. "Susan," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was tired. "Mr. Caldwell, he is at the hospital. He asked if you and your daughter would wait. He wants to speak with you." "Wait." Susan's voice was a whisper. "Here, you can sit in the kitchen," he said, his voice kind. I'll have someone make you some tea." They sat in the vast, stainless steel kitchen. The shrimp smell was gone, replaced by the faint, cold smell of bleach. It was almost 4 in the morning. Susan took a wet cloth and was gently, silently, cleaning the dried blood and plaster dust from Emily's knuckles. Emily winced, but she didn't pull away. "You're okay, Mama?" Emily asked. Susan stopped. A single tear rolled down her cheek and plopped onto the steel table. "He called you brave, Emily." "I was scared," Emily whispered. "I know," Susan said, wiping the tear away with the back of her hand. "That's how I know you were brave." They sat in silence for another hour. Just as the sky outside was turning from black to a soft, bruised gray, Mr. Caldwell walked into the kitchen. He was not the same man. He had changed out of his torn tuxedo. He was wearing a simple gray sweater and slacks. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked 20 years older. He looked like a man who had been pulled from a deep, cold ocean. He stopped when he saw them sitting at the staff table. He walked over and pulled out a metal stool, the kind the cooks used. He sat down with them. For a moment, he just looked at his hands. "He's going to live," Mr. Caldwell said. His voice was hoarse. Susan let out a breath she had been holding. He has severe dehydration. Malnutrition. He broke 2 fingers trying to scratch the hole." He paused, his voice catching. "The doctors said, 1 more day?" That's all he had. Maybe not even that. He looked up, and his eyes met Emily's. "He asked for you," Mr. Caldwell said. "Thomas." He asked, "Where's the girl?" "The girl who gave me water. I told him you were safe." Emily just nodded. Mr. Caldwell struggled for words. He was a man who commanded boardrooms. He could buy and sell companies. But he did not know what to say. "I am a fool," he said, his voice low. "I am a blind, arrogant fool. I saw what she wanted me to see. I believed what she told me. And my son was paying the price. He was right above my head. And I was toasting." He rubbed his face, a gesture of pure exhaustion. "Your mother told me," he said to Emily, "that her job was threatened. That you were threatened. She said she'd fire my mama," Emily said quietly. "She said she'd make it so she could never work again." Mr. Caldwell nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "Susan," he said, "you are the finest woman I have ever had in my employ, and you will never have to work for anyone again." He wrote on a check, his pen strokes sharp. He slid it across the table. Susan looked at it. Her eyes went wide. She quickly put her hand over it, as if it were a fire she had to put out. "Sir, I can't. It is not a gift," Mr. Caldwell said. "It is a debt. It is the smallest payment on a debt that I can never, ever repay. For my son's life." He looked at Emily. "And you can go to any school you want. Any college. Anywhere in the world. I will take care of it. All of it. For the rest of your life. I want you to have the chances you deserve." He stood up. He was still a billionaire. But he was just a father, too. A father who had almost lost everything. "I must go back to the hospital. Thomas is asking for me." He paused at the kitchen door. "Your grandfather," he said, looking at Emily. "He's a war veteran?" Emily nodded. "He taught you well," Mr. Caldwell said. "He taught you to see what other people don't. He must be a very good man." "He is," Emily said. Mr. Caldwell nodded. And then he was gone. Emily and Susan sat in the big, empty kitchen. The sun was coming up. The light was soft and gray. Susan was crying softly, her head in her hands. The check was crumpled in her fist. Emily looked down at her own hand. Her mother had bandaged her knuckles with a small white bandage. It was neat and clean. She thought about the big, loud party. She thought about the beautiful people in their expensive clothes. They were all laughing and talking, but they hadn't heard a thing. They hadn't seen the dark corners. But she had. She was just the maid's daughter. She was supposed to be invisible, but she had heard the cry in the wall. Grandpa Joe was right. Bravery wasn't about being strong, or loud, or important. It was about being scared and doing it anyway. It was about listening, very hard, for the people who were too quiet to be heard. And it was about not ever looking away. And that's where we'll leave Emily and Thomas's story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it gives you a chance to step away from the noise of the everyday and just listen. Maybe it's a reminder that real bravery often comes from noticing the whispers that everyone else is too busy to hear. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe you were settling in with a cup of tea, on a quiet drive, or just finding a calm moment. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our stories, so feel free to also drop your feedback in the comment section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.